Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning,
Good
Ameya. Good
morning.
morning, Timmy. Good morning, all of you. I wanted to know something. If one of you could guide me regarding this as to how to allow all the participants to join in without seeking my permission. I've not been able to find. I was just trying to look at the settings, but I couldn't really, you know, get to
Ma'am,
it.
in Google Meet there is no option.
No option available, no? That's why. Zoom is much better in this regard. At least everyone can join without seeking permission if I allow them in one go. Here I have to give permission to each and every person. I have to admit that person. So in that case, I hope that we start as soon as everybody joins in, because once the lecture gets started and I'm on to sharing my screen, it'll be difficult for me to again come back and then admit people in the group. Well, it will be a huge disruption and actually break the chain of thought. Are you okay with the captions being displayed here, or you want me to turn them off?
Ma'am, we can turn them off.
Okay, these are a distraction. I'll certainly turn them off. I'm really thankful to all of you for having made some time for this extra class. I know it's a busy Sunday for each one of us. And I, for myself, don't like to work on a Sunday because that's the only holiday we get. And, we just want to kind of spend it leisurely, with our family. And the fact that you're all here, I must appreciate it. And it's just because we have to finish our syllabus, so and it becomes difficult for us to arrange an extra class on weekdays, because majority of you don't want to have a class after 3:30 or 4. So arranging an extra class on a weekday is a problem. So I thought, and since we've got our sessionals coming up, I thought let's just have an extra class on a Sunday this one time. Hopefully we don't have to do this again.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, Gurspash.
Ma'am, I'm sharing a form for IT1 only, so I request students to fill that form for attendance. It
Yes.
will the responses will be open for the first 10 minutes only, and only IT1 students have to fill that.
Yeah, and similarly, I think we can have CRs from CSC 1 and CSC 2 also. They can also share their forms, attendance form, Google Forms, and then get the attendance for their respective sections.
I'll be directly marking in the Excel only spreadsheet. So guys, जो participants में होगा मैं mark कर दूंगी.
I've sent the link in the chat for the CSC2.
I don't know, this often happens with me that I tend to get exited from the Google Meet. I don't know how that
मैम
happens.
एप्लीकेशन क्लोज तो नहीं कर देते मैम, उसकी वजह से एग्जिट हो जाता है.
Probably, probably. I'm not used to this one. So 15 minutes have gone by and students are still pouring in slowly and steadily. And I don't know if just start with a presentation because once I'm busy. I think the moment I go back, I don't know, I get exited. I'm so used to Zoom now. We were expecting upwards of 100 students. And that was the reason why we had this, extra class on Google Meet. So we thought that we could project it, stream it live on YouTube to accommodate the rest of the students, considering 3 sections were combined here. Is there any way of making someone else the host for Google Meet?
Ma'am, if that person makes a new link, then everyone can join that link and then that person will be the host.
Okay. Then it will take time for each one of you to, be admitted into that link also.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that will be another long affair. I mean, Google Meet has very little options, I feel. Are any of your teachers using Google Meet?
Ma'am, everyone in our classes using
Everyone is having classes on?
Google Meet, ma'am.
Okay, so you are having all your classes on Google Meet? I didn't know that. But I find this a little problematic. I don't know how are teachers having them on this platform. Nana, could you figure out as to how to live stream a Zoom meeting on YouTube?
Ma'am, that can be done, but you would be requiring a paid account for that.
Okay, for that to be done, you need a paid account. Okay.
Ma'am, you can just download OBS Studio and live stream your desktop.
Ma'am, OBS Studio will work just fine.
Okay, I'll have to, find out more. I don't know. I'm not very well versed with all this latest stuff. Shall we start? Because those who have not joined yet, they can check it check us out, check the lecture out on YouTube and not seek permission here. Would you be able to direct them to sort of tune in to the lecture on YouTube itself rather than coming here on Google Meet?
Yes, ma'am, I've sent the link in the group.
You've done that, right? So now, in case anyone wants to come over to Google Meet, they'll have to wait till the time I finish my presentation. Only then I'll admit them. Otherwise, just tell them that they can continue listening to us on YouTube itself, so that we can carry on with the lecture seamlessly. Because the 20 minutes have gone by, and I think it's time I started with my lecture. Okay, the first topic that we're taking up for discussion today is non-verbal communication. And this is part of your Unit 2. I hope my screen is visible to all of you and my voice is loud and clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, non-verbal communication, as you already know, as I introduced you to the concept when I discussed the basic concepts of communication, I told you that all the communication that takes place without the use of words, okay, is called non-verbal communication. Verbal, the word verbal literally means pertaining to words, concerning words. The meaning that gets conveyed when we use the word verbal is that it is something that has got something to do with words. So non-verbal is that communication which has got nothing to do with words. So that means we are not using the language, we're not focusing on the words which are there in the language, rather we are focusing on something else. And that something else basically comprises of two components. One is your body language and the other is your paralanguage, right? So body language is the way you communicate with your body, and paralanguage is the way you put across your content, so which includes your vocalics or voice related things, that such as your speed of your delivery, the rate at which you are speaking, the intonation, the voice modulation, the pauses, the fluency. So that conveys a lot about you as a person when you communicate. And therefore paralanguage and body language together constitute non-verbal communication. So non-verbal includes both the elements. Mind you, non-verbal is not merely about body language. It's not merely about gestures, posture, your facial expressions, or your eye movement or eye contact, or the way you conduct yourself, carry about, your demeanor, your accessories and the stuff that you carry on you. It's not merely about that. It's also about how something is expressed, the way of doing it, whether you're being funny, whether you're being serious, whether you're conveying something in a very arrogant way, something is being spoken in a very humorous sort of way. So all that gets expressed through your language, through your communication. So as you can make out, it includes your pitch, speed, tone, facial expression, body posture. We will also be looking at the concept of space, how space is to be utilized in various communication contexts. right? Space is a very important, aspect of communication. Chronomics, time. Time is pertaining to the other word that we give to the understanding of time in communication is chronomics. The word we give to touch or the understanding or the study of touch in the whole process of communication is haptics. What is the word we use for it? The formal word haptics. So haptics is communication code which signifies or studies the whole idea of touch in communication. Different kinds of touch are there, intimate touch or kind of a public touch. And space is the other word given to space and how close you will allow someone to, be in your space, or what distance will you maintain with them. That comes under the heading proxemics. So the proximity issues, the space issues, and the study of all of that comes under a broader term or a more relevant technical term that is used for it is proxemics. So I was able to understand what is proxemics. Proxemics is the use of space in communication. Haptics is the use of and the understanding of the touch in communication. And the understanding and the study of time in communication is chronomics. And the study of your gestures and facial expressions is considered as kinesics. The other word given to body language, to posture, to how you stand, to how you move about, to the kind of gestures you have, we call the entire study of all of that as kinesics, right? And the study of your eye movement or your eye contact, what is the duration of the eye contact, what kind of a gaze is do or someone else possesses. The whole study of eye movement, eye contact, or gaze comes under oculesics, right? And there is a role of accessories also in communication. What are the things you're carrying on you? What kind of accessories do you have with you? They also convey a lot about a person, whether your file folder has all the things neatly arranged up, or whether you're wearing a nice, decent, well ironed kind of dress when you meet up in a formal on a formal occasion, or are you well groomed or not. So the whole study of accessories is also very critical to communication. It conveys a lot about the person. And the first thing that we often do, when we meet up someone, is that we try to size them up from their body language. We try to size them up from the way they are dressed up, from the way they carry themselves, from the way they speak. So we often making our guesses that okay, this guy looks to be well read, well educated, or if he's wearing certain kinds of clothes, you'll be able to make out what section of the society does he belong to. So we do that sizing up, and therefore there's a lot that your conduct, the kind of appearance you have, the physical grooming, or the whether you're presenting yourself as someone meticulous, neat, hygienic, or someone who's got ruffled hair, crinkled shirt, maybe dirty cuffs. So that will all convey a lot about you as a person. So as you can see from the slide here, if you look at the communication spectrum, you will find that 55% of the communication spectrum is non-verbal. So it is all dependent on your body language. You convey so much to others by way of your postures, the way you carry yourself, your behavior, your gestures, your facial expressions, your eye contact, all of that. 38% is based on your paralanguage. That is, how are you saying things? How is it getting spoken? How is it getting expressed? Okay, so the content is merely impacting your communication to 7%. So the impact of language is only 7%. The spoken words impact a communication situation only to this extent. But the major impact that the communication process, verbal, your non-verbal communication, wherein 55% of it is your body language, language. I hope I've made myself clear in this regard.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, what does the body language comprise of? Your palms, how are they, being presented, whether they are upwards, in the upwards direction, in the downward direction, you're hiding your palms, all of that conveys something. Your handshake, whether it's a firm handshake or a limp handshake, it conveys a lot about the person. Your arms, thumbs, eyes, legs, how do you mirror the other person? All of this conveys a lot about you as a person. So generally, when you hide your palms, the idea that gets conveyed is that someone is lying or someone is trying to conceal something from others. If you look at the palm up position, then the palm facing up is generally understood as a submissive kind of a non-threatening gesture, right? And palm down is when you signify authority or dominance. Your palms are generally in the downward direction. The upward direction is all about you being non-threatening, a kind of a pleading gesture, and palms closed and you are pointing your fingers at someone. So this is figuratively symbolic of you're trying to make the listener, listen to you submissively. So that is a way of maybe sometimes we blame someone, or sometimes we kind of say things so that the other person can submissively give in to what we are saying. So you're trying to project your authority even in that finger pointing kind of a position. So this is what it looks like, a little submissive, non-threatening, palm down, authoritative, rigid, blaming someone, wanting the other person to submit to what you are saying, pointing fingers at them. Cross arms is a negative, nervous, defensive posture. So generally, this is a kind of a posture one should avoid when dealing with other people, especially in formal occasions, in business meetings, etc., because it's a closed posture, wherein you're trying to be less responsive. You're in a defensive kind of a position and you don't want to open up. It's also a sign of nervousness to some extent. So this is something that can be avoided. Your clenched arms signify your frustration or your negative attitude. Okay, so even these little postures that you see in front of you, they all signify something different, right? You can go into the details of it. I will try to skip it. I will not be able to take each every slide in a thorough manner, because we've got some 3 to 4 topics to cover today. But yes, this is certainly something that you can go back to and read on your own. So this, when your palms are raised like this in a steeple, it's a raised steeple or a lowered steeple. Again, the ideas conveyed are very different. Yeah. So when you're trying to give an opinion or an idea, or you're doing the talking, you raise your steeple. And when you're in a position of listening to other people rather than speaking, you lower that steeple. When you rub your palms together, it is that you are expecting some kind of a response from the other end. So it is symbolic of expecting a positive response from the other end. If you see this posture here, gripping hands, you're gripping your hands at your back, and you're holding your arm in one wrist different, because in each of these pictures here, you see the hand being held at a different position. The first one is basically you are in a position of authority and you're showing your superiority, and that is a gesture of confidence. The second one is a sign of frustration, and you're trying to attempt to control your frustration, you know. So that is a gesture where you're gripping your wrists. And the third one is when you're gripping your upper arm. So this is when you're more angry and you're still trying to hold it all back, and your hands have therefore gone further up, holding your complete arm up there. So this is a different kind of a gesture. Again, these are handshakes. You would see how the handshakes are so different in all these pictures, you know. A limp handshake has to be avoided. A lot of people shake hands, you know, with someone and then they hold the other hand. That is showing us, you know, a kind of a position of authority over the other person. And when you're shaking your hands and your hands are in the upward position, you again showing your dominance. When you shake hands with someone and your hands are in the downward position, you are more yielding and submissive in that scenario. Okay, so again, the handshake also signifies a lot. The thumbs in this case, as you see, you know, are being, you can see the thumbs of the people and they're just holding on to their jacket, you know, and their thumbs are pointing out. So what does this mean? That you are very confident and you are trying to show your superiority. So in each of these gestures where your thumbs are, you know, sort of stuck out of your pockets, and you're projecting a sense of confidence there. Now look at the eyes here. Even eyes have different things to convey, you know. So it depends on how long is the gaze, you know, whether if you look at someone and you are looking at them with a great intent, you know, it's like a long hard gaze, it will convey something. If it's a brief kind of a gaze, you know, you just saw that person and you moved your eyes away from him, it's a different, the meaning conveyed there is very different. One should not stare at others, you know, to make them uncomfortable. A long hard gaze can be a little offensive, and the other person will feel a little uneasy about it. A lot of people, you know, have shifty eyes. When they speak to someone, their eyes are constantly moving left and right, you know. So such people who have shifty eyes and their eyes are constantly moving, they seem to be lying about something or trying to hide something or conceal something, right? So that's also your chance to detect that there could be something wrong in what the other person is conveying. He could be hiding some information, or he may be trying to, you know, deceive you or lie to you, and one should therefore be on one's guard. But then there are a lot of people who may have mastered the art of lying and they can still get away with murder without batting their eyelids, you know. So we can come across such people also who don't bat their eyelids and they can carry off you know, any kind of a lying or deceit without even feeling conscious about it or nervous about it. So such people also exist. So it's not that you'll always be able to gauge what's going on in the other person's mind, but yes, as they say, eyes are the windows to the soul of a person. There is so much you can know just by looking at a person's eyes, you know, whether he's sincere, honest, or whether he's someone who's hurt about something, you know. So one look at the eyes and you would know, you'll be able to you know, make sense of if things, you know, based on how he's expressing himself. So these are your leg cross positions. The standard leg cross position, it's a kind of a defensive. When you cross your legs and you cross your arms, it's a closed body posture. Which can be avoided in group discussions, which should be avoided in business meetings, which should be avoided in any formal, you know, platform like a formal interview, personal interview. because it shows you as someone who's displaying a defensive attitude, that you're not very open to being questioned, to being asked things, and you come across as reserved and nervous. So one must have an open body posture whenever we are in such a scenario, wherein what you do is you keep your legs open, you don't cross them like this, you plant your feet properly on the ground, both the feet, and you rest your arms on the side rests of your chair, which enables you to then use them freely. You don't put them on the desk in front of you. If you want, you can rest them on the desk in front of you instead of the chair, and then use them to gesticulate wherever required to emphasize a particular point somewhere. Right? So that is an open body posture. You have to sit straight without looking stiff. You also have to avoid stooping backwards, or in the maybe front direction. So if you're slumping on the chair, it's again a bad thing. If you are slumping backwards on the chair, again you come across as very laid back, casual, and neither should you be sitting on the edge of the chair. Again it would show you as someone who's very anxious or nervous. So in this leg lock position, where your legs are in somewhat in this fashion, you come across as someone being competitive or argumentative. You're willing to take on anyone head on. And then these are again the different ways in which people stand. So the first posture is a defensive position, because your hands are also locked and your legs are also locked in front of you. So closed body posture. The second position is also closed attitude, a little reserved attitude, defensive attitude, and one must avoid that. Open body posture, where your hands are open in front of you or on the sides, and your legs are also open. This is a more positive, open-minded, receptive, responsive kind of a posture. Okay, so you have something more, and I am going to skip the cigarette part. Also mirroring. This is a very important technique. Someone behaving in a way.
आवाज में चलेगी ना वो बेस में ये बड़ी दिक्कत रहती है कुछ भी मतलब नहीं कुछ नहीं करता हमने एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा हूं 1 घंटे
in the and job and you are someone very similar to the other person to build a better rapport. Copying other person's gestures, copying them, imitating them is a reflection of you showing acceptance to the other person or gaining acceptance from the other person, or also symbolic of thinking in the same manner. And when we talk of space, this is a very important diagram that each one of you should understand and will make use of in this exam. And
ब्रेकफास्ट करना है नहाना धोना सब कुछ कर लेते हैं और क्या ठीक है भाई ओके भाई थैंक यू
your your one day to out that right, not any too close and people bring your family members, your relatives, they are the ones who are allowed in your personal space. So the distance is 0.8 area. People can come in the territory, come into close with you, and these are people with you know, kind of relationship. And we I at the social space, okay, which is 4 feet to 12 feet. From 4 feet to 12 feet is your social space. So people with whom you deal socially, it could be your business people, your business counterparts, clients, maybe a setting where students are sitting at a distance of beyond 4 feet, up till 12 feet. This would be regarded as social space, wherein you connect with people with whom you socialize, with whom you deal. Not beyond 12, it becomes the public space. So in people hosting rallies, politicians holding rallies, they are making use of the public domain, the public space, right? You might not be audible to the public there. You might have the public address system to interact with the people who are there in the public space, right? So you'll use a mic and everything to reach out to them, and it will go up to 25 feet. So, or maybe a bigger space beyond that also. So that is all your public space. So this is the utilization of space around us, or the understanding of space around us, which is understood as proxemics, and how we make use of the space around. Again, this is a very cultural specific phenomenon, right? Different cultures will have different ways of dealing with space. For instance, if you go to America, you'll find that people are asked to keep a one arm distance from you. They'll not allow you in their intimate space. They have their own bubble around them, and they dislike it immensely if someone happens to, sort of get too close to for their comfort. Comes very close to them. So they can get pretty, uh, angry about that. So this is what your intimate space is: 2 feet away from your body, very close, almost 1.5 feet. So anyone who is within that 1.5 feet, they are the people with whom you deal intimately: your spouse, your partner, your family, close family members, your children, who you would allow to get so close to you, and if they are emotionally close to you, and they're allowed to enter this zone. So personal space is about a handshake away. That this is the kind of distance you need to keep when you are in a friendly gathering. Of course, you allow your friends in your personal space. You also sometimes allow your close colleagues in your personal space, certain people with whom you have a greater trust, or maybe a good bond you share. You allow them in your personal space. So when you're 2 arms length away, it becomes the social space. That is the distance we need to maintain with people, sometimes with people we don't know, customers, clients, office people, colleagues, different industries, etc. This is what the public space looks like. We can look at the classroom, or a person, or an expert addressing a gathering in an auditorium as public space. Some training session going on, a trainer addressing the gathering also as a public space. Okay, so that is a distance where you feel comfortable when you're addressing a whole lot of people. So about 3.6 meters away. So touch and the understanding of touch in communication is also understood as haptics, right? Again, this is a very cultural specific phenomenon. As far as this is concerned, you know, in India, you would allow even your colleague to be in your personal space. You know, you would even allow your students to be in your personal space. You know, they can stand close to you. But in other cultures, you would probably not allow people to come very close to you. Again, touch is something you know, which varies in different domains. You know, sometimes in the your touch could be a formal touch, an official touch, a handshake, a slap on the back. You know, is something where you're showing your authority and dominance. The touch would vary when you're dealing with colleagues and professionals. The touch would vary when you're dealing with your close acquaintances or family members or friends, right? So you can hug your team members in a match. That's a nice, positive, friendly, affirming kind of a touch, which we see on various occasions. Yeah, so these are all social and polite touches that you see in front of you. The friendly and warm touches, hugs, you know, are something like that. Fine, yes. So when you do a high five like that, that is also high five like that. That's also kind of a warm touch, and they're all light-hearted gestures with which you display your warmth, with which you display your intimacy. This is a touch of an intimate touch, you know, holding hands, the child clinging on to mother or father, all this, embracing, a dating couple embraces, and that's your intimate touch. So, okay, then comes time, and time is to be understood as chronomics. The study of time is very important in communication, and how we perceive time is different from how people perceive time in other cultures, right? So again, it's a cultural specific phenomena, and we perceive time, we value time in a different way. Other cultures, they value time, they consider and perceive time in a different way. So this has a huge role to play in communication process. You know, there are two concepts which are there. One is monochronic and then other is polychronic. So mono is where you generally do one thing at a time. You know, everything is very nicely structured, segmented into small units. You try to follow things, you know, in that time bound manner. You know, everything is properly scheduled, managed, arranged. You know, these, where time is considered to be a very tangible commodity, and you spend it in a very strict way, you know, in a very regimented sort of a way, you know, and you don't waste it. You just kind of make sure you have display good ethics and use that time constructively. So you'll find most of your Western countries like United States, Germany, Switzerland, Britain, Canada, South Korea, Turkey, and all the Scandinavian countries, you know, they follow the monochronic nature or concept of time. Whereas countries like, you know, the Arab world, India, Pakistan, China, Philippines, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, we all follow the polychronic notion of time, where time is more fluid. You know, we do multiple things at a time, where we don't focus on scheduling things, planning things, you know, uh, to the finest this thing detail, you know, and doing everything precisely and accounting for each moment. That's not how we, you know, use our time in our culture. You know, it's okay for meetings to begin late in our culture. It's okay for trains to run late in our culture. It's okay even if you miss a particular deadline in a culture. You know, you think that it can always be managed. You know, if you missed a deadline, you can try and have another one. Or it's also, you know, agreed generally that time is not a big deal, you know, for us. We can just have and just enjoy things and do a lot of things at the same time. So that kind of a notion is the polychronic notion of time. Now we come to the paralanguage part. So paralanguage, as I said earlier, involves your tone, your intensity, or with which you speak. the pauses you make, and even your silence, which can communicate a lot. Sometimes a very long, stern silence can convey a lot in a particular situation. So also the acoustic properties of speech, that like how the sounds are received by the ears, how the sound is transmitted, so your tone of your voice, the pitch of your voice, the accent with which you speak, these are all called the prosodic speech features of speech. We call them the prosodic features of speech, and they convey a lot about you as a person. So generally your para language has it has a grammatical you know one can say function, and it has an attitudinal function. The grammatical function that it displays is that you are able to frame your questions, you're able to express a certain statement as a command, as an order, wherein the other person will be able to perceive something as an order, something as a command, something as a question or a statement, an assertive statement. You are able to distinguish between different kinds of statements. And it also carries or contains an attitudinal function, wherein someone is trying to be funny, someone is trying to be serious, sarcastic, trying to emphasize a particular point. You are able to make sense of all of that from the way he is speaking, right? So the emotional state of the person, does he seem joyous, energetic, lively, enthusiastic, or is he sounding very low? Is he sounding lacking in intensity or lacking in sincerity? All that can be made out from the tone of that person's voice, from the very voice quality, from the vocals. The language is vocalics. Vocalics. Vocalics is the other word given to paralanguage. So all these are important in conveying our thoughts, in conveying our ideas. That is, whether you are speaking fluently, what accent do you possess, from the person's accent only you'll be able to make out, what part of the, country he is from. Someone with a South Indian accent, you'll know that, okay, he seems to belong to South India, or someone displaying a different accent, you'll be able to figure out which part of the country he comes from, or which part of the globe he comes from, right? And various other elements in paralanguage, like your fluencies, your disfluencies. Sometimes we vocal segregates, we respond to other by we are all these sounds that we make, these are all part of paralanguage. So this is what your paralanguage contains: your volume, how loud or low you are, your action, how clear you speak, how clearly articulation is the clarity of your speech. Whether you're able to express yourself clearly. Sometimes put a nasal sound, the way people speak, their it also contains your voice. And generally seem big amplitude, they're as women. When it comes to pitch, women have a higher pitch. So how, what is the nature of your voice? What is the vocal range? A lot of theater people, theater actors, they have to pitch their voice at a very high, level, so that they are loud and clear to the audience in the theater. So they work on their vocals, they work a lot on their voice quality and how to bring in the resonance in their voice, speak loudly, clearly, fluently, avoid disfluencies, make the pauses at the right time to convey a certain expression, a certain emotion. So the tonal variations in your voice, these are all vocal characteristics. The inflections, the change of tone, the speed, the rate at which you're speaking. Sometimes some people speak very fast. They tend to go very, very fast. So again, that is a sign of nervousness and needs to be controlled. We have to speak in a more measured manner. We have to think out everything carefully and then speak each word in a nice, measured way, and that conveys greater weight, rather than speaking very fast. Also, how you project your voice, what emotions are you conveying through your voice, through your tone, through your inflection. These are all your vocal qualities or vocal characteristics. Again, the way your voice sounds, angry, chilling, seductive, convincing, what kind of a texture you possess, breathy texture, childish texture, or is it a bright voice, soft voice, a cold kind of a voice, hot voice, all that can be understood. And yes, your voice segregates are your sounds that you make, like when you're listening to other people, and all your silences. Now, in the office space, in the office environment, also the way in which space is arranged, the things are arranged, the tables and chairs are arranged. These are important in the whole understanding of communication, and the environment involves your physical and psychological aspects of the communication context, because it impacts your psychology, the environment, the surroundings. They impact your the way you think, right? So you will find that generally the small time employees in the organization, they sit in smaller spaces. The spaces allocated to them are much smaller. They might be asked to sit in small cubicles, whereas you'll find the bosses or the people who are the higher ups, they sitting in plush cabins. They have big luxurious cabins to themselves, so that is also symbolic of the authority that they possess in the environmental in the office hierarchy. So their surroundings will be very different from those of the lower rung officials in the organization, and it does impact your psyche to some extent, right? So also, if you are, the physical context is also very important. Where are you sitting? With whom are you interacting? What is the the layout of that room? What is the lighting in that room? The temperature settings in that room. All this is going to impact the person who's communicating, or the people who are communicating. So, sometimes the psychological context includes the mental and the emotional factors in the communication encounter. So, stress, anxiety, and emotions, they're just an example of the psychological influences that can affect our communication. So, yes, wherever you happen to be in a business meeting, you have to ensure that the seating arrangement is good, the lighting arrangement is good, the public address system is working well, there are no technical glitches, so that better communication can be carried out. Because if the temperature is too cold, then people will be more worried about the AC and why is it making everyone cold out there, and then rather than listening to the person. So again, the chair size and your accessories also convey a lot. Look at the chair size for the person sitting here in the middle. The higher the back of the chair, the more power or the status he's perceived to have. The attention zone is this Y funnel. This is the seating arrangement. People who are sitting in the Y zone will be more attentive. They'll be more interactive. The rest will probably not be able to engage much by way of discussion. They might tend to get little sleepy, or might be a little escapist, not listen that much to what's going on. So the Y zone is where the most of the attention remains. The a speaker in any situation, whether he's an expert delivering a talk, maybe making a presentation, or a trainer, he must look at the crowd making huge sweeping W or a huge sweeping N. So when you make a huge sweeping W with your gaze, or you make a huge sweeping M with your gaze, you tend to cover almost all the people sitting in front of you. We should never direct our gaze to only a certain section of the society. Maybe you start looking at only the people who are sitting right in the front rows. You don't look at people sitting at the back, right? Or you fix your gaze on a few people, handful of people, and you don't move your eyes from them. Even that is wrong. So you will alienate a lot of people in the crowd by not having good eye gestures. It's important for the speaker, the trainer, the presenter to shift his eyes from one pair of eyes to the other, to move his gaze from one pair of eyes to the other. And you are able to cover a whole lot of people when you are shifting, you are making a big sweeping W or a big sweeping M with your eyes. I hope I'm making sense to all of you. And I hope you've understood what we've discussed so far, and I hope I'm not going too fast. I thought let me catch my breath and maybe pause for a moment and get your response on this.
मैम सब समझ आ रहा है.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Very good. So look at the seating arrangement here. How are the people seated? They are seated in the corners of the table, right? Two people seated in the corners of the table. So this is for friendly, casual conversation. Here again, cooperation is being displayed when two people are sitting on the same side of the table, sitting very close to each other. And again, you might have to sit with your colleague, with your friend. You have good eye contact and have an opportunity to mirror the other person, behave in exactly the same way as the other person is behaving, have similar gestures as that of the other person. So this is again a cooperative position. So this is again a cooperative position where three people are involved. In this case, you had only two people sitting on the same side of the table. Here, two people are sitting on the same side and one is sitting on the other corner. So this is where, if you look at A, B, B1 and B2, these are the three people who seem to be sitting in a very cooperative position. So you've introduced a third person here, and then the person C on the other side is the client. So he's the person who is not closely aligned with the other three. So he's made to sit on the other side of the table. Again, this is a competitive and a defensive position. If you're sitting across the table from a person, you can either create a defensive atmosphere or you can create a competitive atmosphere. So it will all depend on how are you positioned, what is your designation, what is your hierarchy in the organization, who are you dealing with. That will determine whether your position is more competitive or more of a defensive position. So this is an independent position who are not engaging with each other. They're sitting on two parts of the same table, separate sides, not willing to engage, not willing to interact. And this is a square table where some short and pointed conversation is taking place, or for creating superior subordinate relationship also such square tables can be had, right? So the A person here is in the position of authority, trying to dictate things to B, C and D. So keeping the people involved. And this is about gifts. These are the things we give to other people. Again, a cultural specific notion. I don't want to dwell too much on this. I think this is something that you can read and know on your own. Chinese people, what kind of gifts do they prefer? They prefer food and food baskets for gifts. And they don't like their gifts to be wrapped in white, blue or black paper. And they don't generally open their gifts when they receive them. Sometimes they can refuse the gift 3 times before they finally accept them. And you need to present your gifts with both the hands. So again, Australians and the people from USA, they also treat the gifts in a very different sort of a way. In Australia, a bottle of good wine is appreciated and they are opened when they are received. In America also, a potted plant makes a good gift. A box of chocolates makes a good gift, and they are also opened when they're received. Giving a gift is a very ritualistic thing in Japan, right? And they like their gifts in pastel colors. A bonsai tree is acceptable gifting item there, and they don't generally open their gifts when they receive them. So in Germany, things are different. In India, gifting gifts is customary in India, a sign of friendship. We all exchange gifts every now and then on birthday parties, anniversaries, marriages, also on some special occasions like Diwali and your important festivals, right? So you don't generally give very expensive gifts, and we try to reciprocate a gift. Someone gives a gift, we try to reciprocate by giving another gift to that person. And you generally give expensive gifts to your close persons, to close people, and we don't wrap our gifts in white or black. It's considered to be inauspicious, so we use bright colored papers, and gifts are not opened immediately on receiving. So you carry a box of sweets. Even a box of sweets is a nice gift on festivals, and we avoid leather and alcohol. So have you understood this presentation here on non-verbal communication?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
A very quick presentation to corroborate what we've discussed. Again, this is pertaining to non-verbal communication only. And I'll just go very quickly. I'll be sharing these presentations on Google Classroom, and you guys can have a look at it. So all your body postures, eye contact, tone of your voice, everything is generally considered under, just give me a yeah. So a lot of what gets conveyed in conversation is through non-verbal means, right? 65% of non-verbal it is, and speak louder than words. So your physical communication happens with your facial expressions, your sense of touch, smell, body motions. Aesthetic communication is dance, nature, all aesthetic ways of communicating. Asking people to stop or crossing your fingers. These are prevalent in every culture, and different cultures will have ways of doing things with signs. And this is non-verbal. Again, this is non-verbal. These are all the things non-verbal. Cross into a particular religious symbol or status symbol. Maybe when you move around in a Ferrari, you are showing or displaying your status in the society. So certain tattoos and certain things, whether you want to come across as someone who's more of a rebel and not someone who aligns with the society norms, a conventional sort of a person. So again, a lot of people put tattoos of all kinds, piercings of all kinds. So these are all symbolic ways of presenting yourself, right? And I've already discussed all these concepts in my previous presentation, where I discussed about kinesics, proxemics, haptics. Oculesics is all eye movement, eye contact.
Olfactics is your smell. Vocalics or paralanguage. Vocalics is your paralanguage. Right? Locomotion is your walking, running, staggering, limping. How do you walk? Do you walk with a limp? Do you walk comfortably? Do you walk with sprightly steps? Do you drag yourself to a particular location? You know, your movement, your body movement also conveys a lot about you as a person. You must avoid an overpowering kind of a perfume or very flashy kind of jewelry when you're going for a formal interview. It might be acceptable in a social gathering, you know, when you use a strong perfume or maybe wear heavy jewelry in a social gathering. But then in a formal space, the jewelry is minimized. You can wear small trinkets. You need to keep your hair properly, you know, groomed and everything, tied up in a pony or a bun for long hair for women. And hair should not be ruffled. You know, your hairstyle should not be funky, you know, wherein you colored your hair or things like that in weird colors in the office space, right? Your clothing ought to be neat and ironed and not wrinkled and crushed, because they convey a lot about you as a person. So the way in which you are seated and your silence also, whether you're pausing, what it express, you're waiting for someone to say something, or if you're trying to, express secrecy somewhere. And these are all your facial expressions. How face is the index of the mind, right? Face reflects everything about you. Your anger, if you're scared, if you are, be surprised or shocked, all that will be reflected on your face. If you're sorrowful, dejected, sad, frustrated, you're cheerful, you're enthusiastic, all that will be reflected on your face. So your eyes, downcast eyes are a symbol of weakness, submission. Raised eyes are a symbol of dominance. Direct eye contact is a way of showing your honesty and transparency. Right? So duration of the eye contact also matters. These are all your various gestures, some of which we discussed in the previous slide. The handshake must be an equal handshake. You know, when you're not trying to put your palm on top of the other person's hand, not taking the palm of the other person on top of your hand. So you keep it straight. You know, the hands are straightened up and not bent downwards or upwards. So that is an equal handshake where you are treating the other person as your equal. So again, these are various body language. You stand with your hands on the hips, it's a sign of aggression. A brisk walk is a sign of confidence. You're sitting with your legs apart, you're in a relaxed posture. Sitting with your arms crossed, defensive posture. With your bending, slumping downwards, hunching, it's a sign of dejection. And a lot of people are also used to, playing around with their hands, constantly scratching themselves here and there. These are all offensive gestures, distractions, which one can avoid. Rubbing your eyes a lot, this is a symbol of disbelief. You seem to be in doubt. You put your hand to your cheek, you seem to be thinking. You're touching your nose slightly, you seem to be rejecting something, doubting something, sometimes even lying. All these with different meanings. What does this raise people mean? It could mean that either you are pondering, thinking, or considering, or it could be an authoritative gesture. Open upward is helping hand. Trust me. Can I help? This is dejected, disappointment. This one out here is a defensive posture, opposition, opposing something. The more open kind of a posture, accepting and welcoming kind of a posture. I've already discussed with you people. Reiterate all of I hope you remember oculistics is all about your haptics, is that proxemics is your space and the whole study of space around you. Paralanguage is your vocalics, is beyond words, beyond words, language, and kinesics are your postures, gestures. So paralanguage is complementary. Whatever you speak, you complement it with your body language and with how you speak it. It's a very unconscious thing, and sometimes it can be learned also. All this, articulation, clarity, where do you make your pauses, how loud or low you are, what is the speed of your voice, how fast do you speak, in the tone, fall in the tone, the stress and trust in our voice in a monotone, speak in the same way, all have the ups and downs of the voice, the mix in our language to and the English is the language. There is an inbuilt rhythm in the language. When we speak English, we express ourselves, whether we make a question, a statement, or an order, we speak in a different sort of a way. And we also display our attitude through the change of tone. Right? So whether you are sarcastic, aggressive, disappointedly enthusiastic, that will get conveyed through your voice, through your tone. And pronunciation is very important. It's a part of your vocalics or paralanguage. We must pronounce our words correctly. We must know the phonetics of every word, where the stress has to be put. Making and expressing your words correctly and pronouncing them correctly can have a very good impression on other people. When you misspell a word, you mispronounce a word, it puts the people off. So articulation, I already told you, we need to be articulate. We should be able to express our ideas in a clear manner, in a confident manner, and not mispronounce our words, and don't speak sloppily. Speak clearly, loudly, in a measured sort of a way. All this is very important. Make the pauses at the right time. Sometimes we pause to let the ideas sink in, or sometimes if there is any hesitation or uneasiness, that's also when you pause. It's a sign of uncertainty in a speaker. But sometimes pause could also signify you agreeing to someone or disagreeing with someone, favoring a particular idea or disfavoring a particular idea. And pauses are also made for effect, just to let the idea sink in into the other person. So again, when you speak, you have to also be wary of the punctuation. So go slow man at work, go slow man at work. So the moment you put the punctuation at a different place, you make pauses at a different place, and it conveys a different meaning. So all this is a part of your para-linguistic features of speech, very, very important, and one must pay attention to how someone speaks. What is the way in which he is conveying himself, and getting reflected through his voice. Entirely, and the next thing. I hope this sense, and I hope I'm not going far. I'll be sharing all the presentations on Google Classroom today itself, and I would advise all of you to go through them. I may have missed out on just them, but majorly I've covered the entire presentation thoroughly. So shouldn't be a problem for you to go through it and give it a quick reading and understanding the ones which we did not take up.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, I need a nod from your end. Are you following what we're discussing here?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
You're okay with going on and proceeding further with the next topic, team building?
Yes, ma'am.
Most of the work is, when you engineer, you join a particular company, you would be made a part of a particular team, and you will be carrying out your projects and everything will. So team building is a very important exercise. Team better. There's a difference between the traditional approach of having departments. There are different departments. The departments become a very rigid thing, more flexible. Teams are quick to assemble, quick to disband. Departments, it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to make a department, and then the chances of disbanding and changing the department will be very different, very difficult also. And in the whole concept of team, what one does is we take people with complementary skills. So on your team, there would be someone who's very good with technical skills. There would be someone who's very good with presentation skills. There would be someone who's very good with, documenting anything. There could be someone who could be very good with maybe planning and arranging everything, organizing things. There could be someone who's very good with the ideas and bringing in a whole lot of out-of-the-box ideas in for the team, or maybe good at research skills. So we generally make a team, formulate a team organization. I mean, not we here, when I say we, it means the organization itself. So organizational strategy is generally to make these small teams, small or big teams, based on how different people can contribute differently, some with good technical skills, some with good soft skills. They can be brought together, some with good research skills, or some with good administrative skills, management skills. They are put together, because when the complementary skills come into picture, the whole work gets done in a very nice way, right? And the team synergy creates wonders. The sum total of the work achieved by the team is much higher than the summation of the work done by the individual persons. So in each individual is contributing, but what the team as a whole contributes is much bigger, much higher, and that team synergy plays the trick there, and is the magical component that brings about, and that heightens up the productivity levels and the efficiency levels of the entire organization. If you could look at the word here, together everyone achieves more. That is how we can understand the notion of team. Each person is contributing to some extent, and each person is achieving much more than what he could have achieved individually. So there is training, there is encouragement, there is objective in mind, and there is plenty of motivation to work. And people are close-knit. They depend on one another. There are dependencies, interdependencies, interdependent skills also, complementary skills also. So a technical guy will have to depend on the research guy, for inputs. And similarly, the soft skill guy will have to depend on the technical guy, the accounts guy for inputs. So there is a great level of interdependency in a team. And they may be in the same place, in the same physical location, or they could be working also and still work as a team. And their efforts are combined. And they're all directing their efforts to achieve a common goal, for which they are working. And yes, for a team to be built, we allocate roles. We allocate responsibilities. Different people will be assigned different roles and responsibilities, and they will all contribute in their role and responsibilities, depend on each other for inputs, for details. And one has to make it very clear as to what work a particular person will be doing, and how they will all be working together to achieve the common goal, the common end. All this has to be clarified. That's what team building is all about. That's how we build a team, right? And this whole strategy is called team building, wherein you identify the people, allocate the tasks, give them the roles and their responsibilities, make sure they are people with complementary skills, make sure they can collaborate with each other, each other, depend upon each other, and then contribute towards a common goal or a common task. So an objective has to be established. This is the work that they have to do. This is the work they have to achieve, and that is what team building is all about. So all the people of the team commonly with that, and each one will contribute, right? So the focus would be on contribution. Focus would be on participation towards that objective at end. So they will all have a participate role and they will also share the responsibility. So the whole concept of team responsibility will also be brought in, so that everyone knows what their job is, how they need to contribute, what kind of a participation expected out of them. You set your expectations for them, the desired behavior for them, the desired work from them, and also put on them the onus for sharing the responsibility of the collective team, outcome, or the entire team will be responsible for the failures also, right? So the setting and the maintaining the team's objectives and standards. This is how we, when the team is formulated, the right people are chosen for the task. First, it is made clear to them that this is what they'll be working at. This is the reason why their team has been created. This is the project on which they'll be working. This is the work that has been assigned to them. What kind of behavior would be expected of them? You have to set the standard for that. No finger, no you have to contribute to you have to play an important role in motivating the other members of your team, right? So the collective fortune of the team is going to be more important than here than the individual efficient individual success in the team, right? So involving the team as a whole towards the achievement of those objectives and maintaining a strong sense of unity in the team, how communicating with each other, they are willing to share their appreciations. So what are their concerns, questions, share and all decision making will be taken effectively with the team. You will need to take everyone on board together. Video takes place between the members. There's plenty of brainstorming sessions, there's plenty of meetings, there's plenty of interactions based on which the troubleshooting will be done, analyzing of done, and all the important will clarify. So basically, you have to ensure that everyone stays motivated. All the members of the team are contributing to the work, the goal of the team. And these would be people from different facets of life, different, as I said, different skills. So, for good that orientation and destination. So there are carried building training data. Some who are is sensitization. So HR people will come in and they will train the team, carry out activities with them, trust building activities with them, sensitize them about how they have to depend on each other, trust each other, listen to each other, and motivate them and encourage them towards fulfillment of their objectives, and to have that orientation that okay, they will fulfill their goals and have that determination. So these are all the team behavior which is going to be useful. You have to display such behavior when you are working as a team. Ensuring happy, peacefully, you don't become abusive, aggressive in a business meeting. You don't, generally, throw your weight around. You are friendly, you are enthusiastic, you give a plenty of feedback, try to receive feedback for yourself, give interesting ideas, share interesting ideas, take initiative, solve problems, bring in humor, seek other people's approval, encourage other people, and maintain a nice congenial working environment for others and for yourself. That would be the kind of behavior that would be expected of you. So basically the key factors your successful team can be and where you are in some strategy, you are giving clear and responsibility to people. That is what we stand for. There is good deal of communication between people, communication, and quick response to people, so rapid and leadership. Take up leadership to lead the rest of the group. Display leadership qualities, keeping the interest of the whole in mind, keeping the interest of the whole team and on your mind, giving other people the improve on the opportunity to voice their thoughts and concerns. These would be, and of course, personal individual goals over the team goals, team orientation or the team objective that you have set for yourself when you start out. So SCORE is a strategy which is going to come in very handy in ensuring that the whole team works very cohesively. The whole team works very close together and collaborate well, cooperate well, interact well and openly, so that they can be more, they can accomplish much more than what they would had they been doing the work individually. So strategizing is important, having a shared purpose is important, clearly articulating your values and the rules for the group, okay, that nobody will, counter anyone's idea just like that for no rhyme and reason. Let everyone have a say, let everyone express themselves, right? No finger pointing would be done in case they get stuck up somewhere. We will not attack each other personally. These are the rules we set for the team sets for itself, and they have to understand themselves and appreciate what risks can be there, what opportunities they can have as a team. So they have to constantly keep evaluating those things so that they can get more work done. And what happens is when you people start working as a team, people think that, okay, now that the team has come into picture, the team is functioning, even if you don't work much, the other people are at least working for you, so you can take a back seat, you can just enjoy life, let the other people do all the working. It does not function like that. Even your individual outcome, your individual contribution will be measured. Your individual results will be kept into picture. So there has to be a lot of transparency, a huge sense of individual responsibility that you will also be contributing equally and not take a back seat or not think that, well, when others are doing the job, तो मुझे करने की क्या ज़रूरत है, right? So the roles have to be taken in such a way that you are not shying away from work. You are not thinking that let others take a precedence, or let others take the lead and you will go on following what they dictate to you. But you will also come forward and voice your ideas and thoughts so that you can contribute meaningfully to the team. I hope I'm making sense to all of you.
Hanji ma'am.
Yeah. So the roles and responsibilities have to be given out very clearly. The responsibility is collective, to be shared by everyone. and the objectives have to be very, very specific. And you also have to establish a sense of urgency. जब तक वो urgency नहीं आप establish करेंगे तो टीम का contribution और टीम के efforts उतने impactful नहीं होंगे. What do I mean by urgency? Establishing urgency, setting deadlines. This work needs to be done by this time. This work needs to be done by this time. So when you set deadlines and establish that this work is really urgent and needs to be attended to immediately, and that establish time the people will not be so laid back. People will actively contribute towards meeting those deadlines and finishing off their tasks as quickly as possible. A lot of open communication, brainstorming is there. People will be having, but then you must learn to respect their different perspectives. Disagree. Even if you don't agree with someone's thought process, someone's perspective, you respect it at least, and you come to a common ground. You build a consensus. So it's very important in a team, a consensus is built. That majority of you have a similar thought, a similar approach, a similar line of thought, or a similar decision in mind. Okay, so when the broad consensus is achieved, you can then follow that task and then see it to completion to ensure that there are no disruptions and don't put off anyone, and everyone's has a say and everyone's words have been taken into consideration. Everyone's ideas have been taken into consideration. So good response, rapid response to any issues, any problems that arise, managing them properly, internally, externally, being a team leader yourself and encouraging others also to take a lead is very important. So leadership also has to be shown and displayed by each member, not thinking that, okay, let someone else take the lead. You can also display your qualities wherein you are allowing other people to have their spotlight, allowing other people to have their say, right? And you draw out other people's ideas, skills, and this is all very important. So the common need has to be established, that your individual goals are not so important. What is more important is the common goal that each one of you has for that team. So each one of you should strive to make that work profitable for your organization. So that common objective has to be established. You saw what happened in the movie Chak De, right? How there was a complete change of fortunes for the Indian hockey team under the leadership of the coach there, and how when they all understood each other well, developed greater trust and confidence in each other's ability, learn to recognize differences. That someone was good at wicket keeping, the other person was good dribbling or passing, and the other person was good at hitting. The individual roles and responsibilities, their differences in terms of what they were good at, and when they complementary skills came together, they were able for victory. This is what society does. This reminds me of the movie Lagan. I hope all of you will agree with me on this, that the movie Lagan also shows exceptional team building skills, wherein this young fellow, Bhuvan, Amir Khan, he manages to spot the talent in different people. Someone's good with handling the ball, someone is good catching it, or someone is good at hitting it big with a bat, or someone is good at wicket keeping and passing the ball. So how does he manage to identify the good qualities and the different talents that different people possess? And they are people who have complementary skills, So someone is excelling at something, and then how they collaborate together, come together, develop greater faith in each other's abilities, develop their interdependencies, and when they have this common goal in mind that they have to win the match against the Britishers, if they want to
get rid of the lagan on them.
लगान देना पड़ेगा बंदे में.
हाँ, जब उनको ये रियलाइज होता है कि अब बचेंगे तभी जब गेम जीतेंगे, so they give their their best to the game, and they come out victorious. So that's another beautiful example of team building for us, wherein there are people who who come up as leaders. It's a situational leadership. लगान में भुवन जो है एक लीडर के रूप में इमर्ज होता है. He takes up the onus, he takes up the responsibility, he tries to train everyone, he makes everyone practice the game, he knows how to do things tactfully. He learns the game from that English lady, and how does he then manage to take his team to victory. So that is also an exercise in leadership and team building, right? So you have to involve the people and lead them creatively, encourage them to take initiative, right? So how does he encourage them, motivate them, that you're so good with the ball, why don't you try doing this, why don't you try doing this? That's the motivation where, and that's how the leader motivates, or your teammates encourage you, right? And the combined effort to a single target. So all of you will have a common goal, a single goal, and each individual will grow in the process. There will be ample space for individual growth too, and you will be able to broaden your vision, because you will be dealing with a whole lot of other people. So you'll have more number of creative ideas in your repertoire. So wherein your whole vision will be broadened. So team building also broadens your vision, and rewards and recognitions can be given, for those who perform well, or those who contribute more than the others. So that can also be a side-by-side activity that can be carried out. And how does it impact you? It grooms your personality, it broadens your vision, you develop a V attitude. You don't remain as an individual who's only working towards his own success, but you're also willing to, grow along with other people and develop other people along with you. So you develop greater trust with your co-workers and a greater sense of responsibility, and you won't then go about blaming other people. Rather, you all take the ownership of the task project and make sure that it's a collective success or a collective failure for you. So coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. Have you understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am.
And one last thing which I wish to discuss in the next 15-20 minutes is interpersonal skills. And this is very similar to your interaction with other people, so it's a very broad term, involving team building, involving leadership, involving all kinds of other things we do in the organization, when we deal with other people. So how do we negotiate, how do we persuade them, how do we communicate with them? It is all inclusive term. Interpersonal means involving a second person, that you are not dealing with your individual self, that there is someone else involved. And good, it's a very important requirement by recruiters. They want people with good interpersonal skills. They don't want people who are, very reserved, shy, keeping to themselves, not willing to interact with others. Rather, everyone wants people who can reach out to others, who can instruct others, listen to others, persuade others, motivate others, encourage others, act as a team, take the pains of listening to other people, persuading other people, solving problems with other people. So, they want this ability in people, that they come out of their own individual selves, their own isolated selves, and be willing to work as team, being willing to contribute by dealing with all kinds of people around you. So you could be dealing with clients, customers, subordinates, your peers, your seniors,
people with less or low interpersonal skills are generally not considered for promotions also. So let's find people who are left behind. It's because they want to reach, they remain in their own comfort zone. They want to just do the work, go back home. So they're not the ones generally going around dealing with all kinds of people around them. So that's also one of the reasons why they're not so visible in the organization, and probably they miss out on the chance for impacting more people, uh, being a part of policy changing, being a part of decision making, and also sometimes overlooked for promotions also because they keep to themselves, right? So possessing good interpersonal skills will definitely brighten your fortunes, will make it good for you to climb the ladder of success quickly in your organization. So what are your interpersonal skills? These are your life skills, soft skills. We need them in our everyday lives. We have to communicate with all kinds of people individually. So how well are we placed in interacting with those people will depend on your interpersonal skills. So majority of the people who possess proper skills have been found more successful in both their professional lives and in their personal lives. And this is the entire gamut of skills which are considered to be interpersonal. So whether you are adapting to your surroundings, negotiating with someone, building a team with someone, communicating to someone, resolving some conflict somewhere, persuading somewhere or someone, or trying to assert your case, present your case with a lot of affirmation, these are all interpersonal skills. So what are the types? All these. You have to convey, interact with people verbally. Good communication is part of interpersonal. Not with your voice. Your listening skills. Are you listening to other people? Are you engaging with them by way of patiently reaching out to them and listening to what they have to say? That this is how you develop good interpersonal skills. How do you come up with a mutually agreeable outcome? Negotiating with people. Negotiation is very important with activity in your day-to-day organizational work, right? So bringing about someone to have a change of mind, negotiating with them, solving problems for other people, taking decisions, policy decisions or some troubleshooting certain problems, analyzing options, being assertive, expressing yourself with a lot of confidence, assertion, when what you want, what you need, what information you expect from others, or the behavioral expectations you set for others. These are all expressed through your interpersonal skills. So I've already talked about communication skills at length, courtesy, consideration. These will be the the defining factor skills. When you show courtesy, good manners, good etiquettes, saying thank you, sorry, expressing, showing your, maybe expressing your apologies if you were to err somewhere, make a mistake somewhere, these are all uh, and respect. The communication will come to when interacting with people. How do you adopt and when we start, please will you in start doing their gestures, the other person starts looking at you as more with greater confidence and more trust in you, and becomes more friendly with you. So you seem to be accessible, one who is your reach to understand you and to you. So you are going very and contributively towards your interpersonal skills. You just listen to other people without judging them and give them all the they will be willing to be persuaded by you. They will be willing to listen to you, So going dwelling on negotiating is differences, negotiating any argument, how do you compromise or something, somehow do you arrive at some agreement. There are people who can disagree with some things. So how to bring about a change of mind or a change of heart in them by employing principles of fairness and mutual benefit, that okay, this will be the benefit which will accrue to both of us if we were to adopt this strategy or adopt this particular policy. So this is a way of building better relationships and not cutting off your relationship with others just because two people think differently, right? So how do you discuss, compromise, deal, come up with a deal with someone and finally get them to agree with you. So problem solving is also very important, taking decisions day to day, identifying what the problem is, exploring other information and ideas to solve that problem, selecting the best idea and testing the best idea, building the right idea and evaluating the results. So problem solving is a good interpersonal skill. Your ability to take decisions is an interpersonal skill. How well can you take decisions for others, quick decisions? How you don't wait for other people to, sort of, uh, to not wait too much. Rather than you're quick to taking decisions which are important and will impact a lot of people, right? So this is very, very important. So decision making ought to be fair. You can't be unfair to anyone. You ought not to show or practice favoritism, not show partiality. Be confident. Think about it. Take it while before you take the decision. Don't be hasty. Don't be impulsive. But yet think for the betterment of the whole team or for the whole group or for the department. How are you assertive? Whether you speak with a lot of conviction and confidence or not. And there's a very fine line between aggression and assertiveness. If you tend to be a little passive, you're willing other people to trample upon you. You are passive. You're disrespecting yourself because you are willing to listen to other people and you're not able to put across your point in a side of the of the whole spectrum. Then you are being more aggressive, which means you are throwing your weight around and you're disrespecting other people. So how it is important for us to protect our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own territories, while we respect other people's ideas also, their feelings and their thoughts also is very important. This is the whole balance of assertiveness, so we have to be assertive without being aggressive. Speak with conviction, speak with confidence, be respectful of your own thoughts and ideas and what the behavioral expectations you have from others or towards you, that how they should treat you. Okay, so this will be a reflective of your own confidence levels and your own conviction levels. So these are the interpersonal skills which are very important: listening to other people actively, caring for them, displaying leadership, motivating other people, taking responsibility, and teamwork, being a team player. So it's important in the workplace because it improves your relationship, builds better relationships with customers, clients, colleagues, peers, bosses, subordinates, enhances your productivity level, gives you a good working environment, is good for your overall success, builds your leadership abilities, and you are liked by other people. So interpersonal skills are a very important aspect of your personality development. And if you work on your personality, you will further be able to work towards your leadership skills. So it will impact your leadership skills also. So smiling, not staying aloof, not being arrogant, being appreciative of other people, paying attention to other people, practicing active listening, bringing the people together, working as a team. These are all going to be important. So in interpersonal skills, with interact with other people. So we need to use relationship building language, right? So interpersonal skills is where you are using language where you build relationships. So displaying your
मैम
listening attitude, yes.
मैम एक्चुअली हमारी एक क्लास है मैम मनमीत सर की.
Ma'am, sir has sent the link and he is waiting for us.
Okay, so it's 1 o'clock and I think I'll wind up here. I don't have much to say now. It's more or less over. Just give me a minute to wind up. So interpersonal skills जो हैं वो आपकी लाइफ में बहुत काम आते हैं. आपको सही लैंग्वेज का इस्तेमाल करना है. मैंने आपको बोला ना, लैंग्वेज टू बिल्ड इंटरपर्सनल स्किल्स. प्लीज कहिए, थैंक यू कहिए, एक्सप्रेस योर अप्रिसिएशन, डिस्प्ले रिस्पेक्ट टू पीपल, display your respect for their time also. And these are some examples which you can go through, how you can ask things, help from someone, and thank them for the work they do. This will help you in building better relationship with other people and therefore better interpersonal skills. So how you should avoid having a can't attitude and display a can attitude. So avoid a negative language in your writings, in your expressions. When you speak to other people, use positive attitude, and that's how you will win over people and be able to interact better with them. So just go through the rest of the slides. I'm not going to dwell on the rest of the slides. I think I've covered fairly what needed to be covered. So you guys can now leave, go for your extra class.
Thank you ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
ma'am.
Yes ma'am.
So today we
Yes, ma'am.
discussed team building, we discussed interpersonal skills, we discussed non-verbal communication, both body language and paralanguage. Okay, so I'm ending the meeting here. Bye-bye everyone. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for being